Welcome to part 1 of What If Naruto was born 8 years early. So, how this is gonna work is, basically Naruto would be born 8 years early when Minato and Kushina would have been around 16. So, when they were 12, Kushina obviously got captured by another village and Minato saved her. After this point, except for Minato being a knucklehead, him and Kushina would slowly start getting together, and 2 years later they'd, at the age of 14, be doing some stuff they shouldn't be doing, if you know what I mean. And 2 years later, or about 1 year later, the inevitable happens and Kushina gets pregnant. When they turn about 16 is when Kushina actually gives birth. Obviously this was hidden from the rest of the village and people just thought that they were out on missions or something, but Minato and Kushina were moved to a safe place, and this time, instead of people actually knowing about it, the only people that knew about it were Minato, Asuma, and obviously Sarutobi. The reason I think it would be Asuma is because even though they weren't really friends, Minato would have still known Asuma. Like, he's the third Hokage's son. Like, how not? Like, even though he's like straight up, what, 10 years younger, that's the third Hokage's son. And I feel around this time, Asuma would still be, fine with Hiruzen. So, in my mind, he would spend a lot of time, so he'd probably find out or figure it out. Even if he didn't, it doesn't really matter. And obviously Mikoto, because she is obviously Kushina's best friend, but she wouldn't relay this to the Uchiha clan since they probably try and take the Nine Tails. So, what would occur is Naruto would be born, and it would be revealed to the village that, not even to the village, like just a few people would know this, like their friends, everything. And as Minato would grow over the next 2 years when he turns 18, taking on multiple Jonin level fighters on his own out in the war fields, because the war actually isn't done yet. As we know, the war just ended before the Nine Tails attack, like a few months. So yeah, Minato hasn't gotten the name Yellow Flash yet, but he is one of the elite Jonin so far. At this mark is when Kakashi would early graduate and would be placed on a solo team with Minato since there wasn't any other openings. So Minato had to take special care of Kakashi, teach him some more jutsu, and because Minato had a son, he felt responsible for people like Kakashi who didn't have families, so he treats Kakashi like he would treat Naruto. He basically brings Kakashi to his house, they have dinner, and Kakashi actually lives with them. Not like intends to live with them, but he just stays over so much that you would think he lives there. So Kakashi had obviously grown overly attached to Naruto because it's like his little brother, and he doesn't want Naruto to go through anything like he did. So about another 2 years would go past, and this is around the time, I believe, where Orchimaru would start his experimentation. Things like Tenzo would pop up, but that's still a secret for now. I'd say after these other 2 years had passed, Naruto would be 4, and because of his near Jonin level chakra reserves as a 4-year-old, because he's still an Uzumaki plus the son of Minato and Kushina, who have some of the largest chakra reserves ever. He's still born with spiky blonde hair, blue eyes, and 3 whisker mark birthmarks. That's not going to change, and people actually respect Minato around this time because this is when Minato gets really popular, and Naruto was gonna be trained almost immediately because people just assume he's a prodigy like his father. Obviously Minato is constantly out on missions, being one of the most elite Jonin within the village and one of their only basically seal masters left. And yeah, the Uzumaki clan is still around, but I think they would be in the midst of the war by now, so there wouldn't really be as much contact with them. Also, Minato is their only space-time jutsu specialist, so they can't really rely on anyone else for that. So he is sent out a lot to scout things to make sure there's no seals and bomb seals, stuff like that. Anything that can basically give away locations, stuff like that. So Minato isn't home a lot of the time. So one day Kushina basically decides to take out Naruto. So Kakashi is something else. The times Minato aren't around but he's just at home lazing around, he would train Naruto not in only hand-to-hand combat, but also in some forms of chakra control. He didn't teach Naruto how to quote unquote water or tree walk, but he did drop subtle exercises like enhancing your vision, enhancing your scent, enhancing your hearing, strengthening your skin, like just stuff like that. But Naruto can't really do all of those because he doesn't have refined chakra control. It's around this point that Kakashi would take him to a training field and start training him to basically do tree walking. Naruto couldn't really catch on to it as fast as Kakashi would, and Kakashi was confused. So Kakashi was sent out on a mission because around this time I believe he'd be a Chunin. So basically Kakashi would be sent out on a mission with some other Chunin, and Kushina would be left alone with Naruto. Obviously Naruto would be hyped to push his tree walking exercises when Kushina basically finds him and actually says, let's go to a training ground. The training ground she takes him is actually an Uchiha owned training ground where her and Mikoto used to train, but when they arrive there, no one's there, so it's a little curious. They didn't really have to ask permission since no one was there, so they just started basically teaching Naruto. Naruto would put a certain amount in, and Kushina, being a censor to some degree, would basically tell him when he's doing too much or too little. When eventually Shishui and his father would show up. So yes, this is Shishui Uchiha. He would show up and basically just be amazed. Obviously this is about the time Kushina and Shishui's father would start interacting, and Shishui and Naruto would also be interacting at this point. Let's first look at basically Shishui and Naruto. Shishui would look at Naruto and be like, you're doing the same thing I'm doing. Naruto would ask what he's doing, because depending on his answer, they might not be talking. Just because Naruto is a little arrogant in this one, and Shishui says he's also doing tree walking, but has not even gotten as much success as Naruto, and he says he could master it, and Naruto obviously asks how, and Shishui just says he can use the dojutsu of the Uchiha, being the Sharingan. Naruto and Shishui are much more intelligent, sorry I can't speak, than children their age. They're easily gaining levels of intelligence alone, and Shishui doesn't have as much chakra as Naruto, only having around high Genin to low Chunin level reserves, with the Naruto being the high Jonin levels of reserves just because of his lineage. So what would happen is we'd switch over to Kushina and Shishui's father. They'd be talking, and it actually turns out that Shishui's father is a part of the Anbu instead of a part of the Uchiha police force, because he wants to work outside of the village and not inside of it, and wants to do more dangerous tasks. Actually, Shishui's father is one of the few remaining Uchiha with a Mangekyo, so he's actually highly held by the village, and it turns out that he's only home a few days of the month, so he can't really interact with his child much. And sadly, Shishui's mother isn't really a shinobi of sorts. She isn't actually a shinobi at all, since she hasn't even learned basic chakra control. Sure, she is a blooded Uchiha, which means she wasn't married, she was an Uchiha from the start, and just married another Uchiha. She never really unlocked her Sharingan because she was never put in that situation. But then it is also revealed that Shishui has the one Tomo Sharingan. Actually, how this happened is Shishui was looking at Anbu battlegrounds looking for his father when a rogue shuriken almost hit him straight between the eyes. He barely was able to unlock his one Tomo Sharingan and dodged it with a slight gash going through his cheek and cutting off some of his hair. So yeah, Shishui has the one Tomo Sharingan already, but he doesn't really want to use it to his advantage because he feels Naruto could be his rival. Switching back to Shishui's father and Kushina, we see that they have realized Naruto and Shishui getting along, and then basically challenging each other to see who gets up. Also, Shishui's father points out that Shishui has the one Tomo Sharingan, so he could have already mastered this if he wants to, and Kushina says that's actually a better idea for him not to use it because it will give him some sort of work ethic and not have that common Uchiha personality of I'm better than you because I have the Sharingan. So both of them actually see this as a good thing and not as a bad thing. So obviously this is more or less seen as for the betterment of both children. Then a few Anbu appear and Shishui's father is called to the Yokage's office. Shishui obviously knows that his father has a dangerous mission and looks kinda sad. That's when Kushina offers to basically have Shishui train with Naruto until dark, and then Kushina would take him back to the compound. Shishui's father is delighted, as is Shishui, because he's making friends with Naruto. So Shishui's father would leave, and Kushina would be slowly but surely pointing out what they're doing wrong. Obviously, Naruto is more straightforward, trying it until he gets it right, while Shishui is staying back and observing a little more, similar to how Shikamaru would in Naruto. So I believe that they'd be exhausted at around the same time, because Shishui would try every now and then lean back to see what Naruto's doing, get some pointers from Kushina, but he does have a lot lower chakra reserves than Naruto, and Naruto would eventually get exhausted because he doesn't have the Nine Tails. So this is part 2 of What If Naruto was born 8 years early. So last time we left off, Naruto and Shishui had just finished their first day of chakra training with Kushina, and Shishui was taken home by Kushina, and Kushina met Shishui's mother, a beautiful woman, nice person, nice personality, really cared for her child, and she saw that Naruto and Shishui got kind of attached. But she already knows that they're both aspiring ninja or want to be ninja just by seeing how they train and the type of clothing they're already wearing. So she knows that Shishui would probably be spending a lot of time with Naruto, and she also knows that her husband had just gone out on a 3-week trip. So if you don't know, Minato had also recently gone out on a 3-week trip because he is one of the most fearsome fighters in the Leaf, even though he'd be around 20 at this point, because it's still like 4 years before the Nine Tails attack, and at this point he was still dominating in the war, just he hasn't made that massive debut yet. So all of them are out on missions, and Shishui's mom is about to head out to the countryside where she can buy things for easier, because she doesn't rely on the clan as much as other Uchiha families do, and likes to spend some time in the countryside by herself, and knows for about the next 3 weeks she would also not be there. So her and Kushina go out on a rant, and turns out that they fit together pretty well, and Kushina is basically asked if Shishui could stay over at their place for like 3 weeks. She'd pay for it, blah blah blah. Kushina says it's no need, since she is technically the head of the Uzumaki clan from this point in the village. So all the Leaf Village essential Uzumaki clan property and money and stuff is hers, but Land of Whirlpool not, because the Land of Whirlpool is technically still around, if y'all don't know. So what would happen is Kushina would accept Shishui coming over, and Shishui's mother would move the next day. He packs a few stuff and goes sleeps over at Naruto's place. Obviously, Kushina just seems like that determined person. She seems like a strict mother and probably a strict sensei. So I feel the next day she would use her extraordinary sensing abilities, not only as an Uzumaki but as a Nine-Tailed Jinchuriki, to basically help Naruto and Shishui get optimal control over their chakra. So after helping them get a hold of tree climbing within the first few hours of that day, she doesn't really care about the optimization where you can unconsciously do it for 3 hours, because she sees if you can do it for around 30 minutes unconsciously while fighting someone, then you should be around night. And Naruto and Shishui had both gotten proper martial arts training at this point, so they can do hand-to-hand combat, nothing too excessive. So after about an hour of that, they just move on, because in her eyes they're already done with it, because she can sense that they have high levels of chakra reserves, and the tree climbing 3-hour exercise just to build up on chakra reserves, so they don't really need it. But water walking is a different story. So what essentially would happen is Kushina would immediately want to start water walking. She'd explain the difference in concept and the difference in how your chakra must be molded. So instead of Jiraiya just showing him and explaining the minor details, Kushina's gonna go into extreme details, make sure they have optimal control over chakra. So I'ma say, because water walking is actually a bunch more difficult, it would take them about 2 days. Shishui's still not actually using his Sharingan. Y'all are probably, I was like, Shishui is OP, he could one-tap anyone. I don't care, because Shishui, yes, being one of my favorite characters, I want him to do that, but he's not able. He's 4. So they would just achieve water walking about in 2 days. So this is actually a feat on its own. It's actually very complex. So Kushina would move on to other things. I'd say she'd give them another day to master water walking, where they could basically spend all day on the water and just do stuff like this. Obviously, I think Shishui around this point would start developing his Chunin levels of reserves, because the more he trains without using his Sharingan, the more benefit his body sees from it. So if he activated his Sharingan, he would be high Chunin levels of chakra reserves, because as we know, the Sharingan can sometimes, depending on which continuity you're reading or which what if you're watching or what YouTuber you like, could have different effects. And for this what if, even though this isn't really canonized, if you have latent potential in my eyes, the Sharingan should be able to awaken it. Sure, it's not going to double his chakra reserves or anything, but it's just going to push him to be able to use as much chakra as possible. So I'm going to just say he has high tuning levels of chakra reserves. He just can't use them all because his body has a natural barrier towards it, and the Sharingan just removes that barrier. And Naruto, being an Uzumaki, can obviously surpass his barrier pretty easily. So I'm gonna say that she would see the potential in this. And taking a few chapters from Better Left Unsaid, I'm gonna say because of how easy they master this, similar to how Asuma thinks that Naruto should get the Shadow Clone, or because he has the Shadow Clone should try and learn something else. Naruto doesn't actually have the Shadow Clone, but he's gonna learn the same jutsu. They're gonna learn the body flicker, the jutsu Shishui is famous for. So Naruto actually catches on within the first few hours because of his massive reserves and him being able to basically spam until he figures it out. He basically figured it out, and Shishui was a little more cautious. He could use it, but not in long ranges, and he has to really know the place, and it drains his chakra reserves immensely. So he sees battle potential in it because of the speed you can actually move at, so he might use it in the future. So I'm gonna say over the span of these next 3 weeks, this is when they would be taught chakra control specific skills. So obviously they'd be taught chakra enhancement throughout the body, which means enhancing your punches, not to the degree of someone like Tsunade, but still enough. So their childish punches would probably be able to take out a Genin that's not prepared. Their foot speed using as much chakra as possible and not activating the body flicker is immense. Their reaction time is amazing. Their eyesight is brilliant. Shishui has to actually concentrate more when he enhances his eyesight to not activate his Sharingan, because he hasn't had that much experience, so he can't consciously make it so he actually has to concentrate to enhance his eyesight and not use the Sharingan. To enhance their hearing, to enhance their sense of smell, all that type of stuff. Obviously not to the extent that some characters can, because, or why would us? Or why would we? I don't know. Why would us? I don't know what that grammar is. But they would have immense chakra control. They would know things that shouldn't be known and know how to what I call bursting chakra. So what bursting chakra necessarily is, if you think about the Rasengan, it's basically an orb of spinning chakra that is contained outside the body. What bursting chakra is going to be releasing a large amount of chakra from inside your body to the outside to create a mini like shockwave in a short range. Shishui's is obviously smaller than Naruto since he has smaller amounts of chakra, while Naruto has a wider range of about, I'd say, 3 to 4 foot. While Shishui could only do 1 foot because Naruto once again has almost Kage level reserves at this point, high Jonin to high Anbu level reserves, I don't even know anymore. So I'm pretty sure that these two are beyond prodigy at this point. Kushina would pick this up and wants to enroll them in the academy early, but obviously she can't actually do that yet since, you know, the academy technically is in the middle of the year, so she's just gonna worry on training them. This would be around the point where Minato and Shishui's father would return, and it actually turns out they were on a mission together. And basically the Anbu, which is Shishui's father, would have told Minato that he met his son, and Minato already knew who the person under the mask was because of him being a legendary level censor. And if you don't know, legendary in my eyes is above sounding above 5 Kage. It's like just godlike sensory, because Minato is amazing. Like, doesn't matter how you put it. Minato, right after being resurrected, could probably take on all 5 the Kage, just like Madara could. Obviously, he's not Madara level, but he's close enough. So, I'd say we're gonna see Minato actually training them. So, obviously, this would be around the time Shishui would want to spend some time with his dad, same with Naruto. And it actually turns out that both of their dads took a leave of absence for about a week, and that, even though Shishui's mom is back, she's gonna spend some time with both Mikoto and Kushina to get to know them. Around this time, it would also be revealed that Mikoto had a 2-year-old child named Itachi, which Kushina knew about, but Shishui's mother didn't, because she didn't really mess with clan affairs, because she didn't really see herself as a part of the Uchiha clan. She saw herself as someone that just bears the name and has no attachments to the clan, because they lived in the compound but at the edges of the compound, so they could stay away from everyone else. So I'd say after spending a few days together, basically Minato and Shishui's father would come together and start training the boys. They would basically see that the boys had already learned all this chakra control, more than they actually need at this point, and would actually decide on teaching them a jutsu that their reserves are accustomed to at this point. Because if you didn't know, even 3 weeks of just trying to up your reserves could have you go up an entire rank. So I'ma just easily say Shishui at this point would have low Jonin levels of reserves, so they're gonna be taught the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Obviously, Minato has abused this sometimes to basically improve the Rasengan and basically the Flying Raijin, which he's still technically working on. And I think that the Uchiha used to use it to be like a cheat if they didn't have their Sharingan yet, to just make sure that even with the Sharingan they're more superior, or whatever it's called. So these two would be on the steps of learning the Shadow Clone. Obviously, it's going to be taught to them in minor steps and not just given to them completely, because if they do it wrong and lose all their reserves, they'll probably be dead, because as I said, Shishui isn't really that level, he wasn't canon, and Naruto doesn't have the 9 tails. So this is part 3 of what if Naruto was born 8 years early. So in the last part of this, we basically went over Naruto and Shishui training with Kushina, and then eventually getting to their training with Minato and Shishui's father. So as you can see in the thumbnail, yeah, Shishui's finally gonna use his Sharingan for something and not just gonna have it for no reason whatsoever. But yeah, so how this would essentially go is Minato and Shishui's father over the span of the next week would teach them the Shadow Clone Jutsu, but would obviously be put back on duty around this time because it is still war. And what they basically decided to do is dive into their archives and basically grab something for the kids, but obviously they couldn't really do much. They just told them about the how Shadow Clones basically is there to relay memory, when actually Naruto has the bright idea of using them to read, using them to do chores, things like that, because Shadow Clones always obey the original. Just ignore that filler episode in Shippuden, because that was filler, not canon, and we all know that. So Shadow Clones are actually pretty useful. So what Minato would essentially suggest is that Kushina would teach them the basics of things like sealing ninjutsu, because Kushina is actually also a sealing master slash sealing expert because of her Uzumaki heritage, and is actually pretty good all around. And then Shishui's mother, not needing to be left out, we teach them basic life skills like cooking and self-care, how basic table manners, stuff like that, things you need in the shinobi world. So what would go on for about the next few months is Naruto and Shishui would spend some time with Shishui's mother, basically doing house chores or learning to do stuff. So after that, they would go to Kushina and start learning basic sealing jutsu or creating seals, which are usually things like explosive tags and storage seals. So basically, a storage seal is one of the most useful seals within Naruto because depending on the seal, you could do something else. Look at the seal on Gaara's forehead that could seal the entirety of a shukaku, which was actually made by some novice level seal masters. Imagine something a master could do, or a group of masters could create, because as y'all know, basically Gaara doesn't have a Jinchuriki seal. He has a storage seal sealed with basically Shikaku sealed in a normal storage seal. That's why it's so unstable. And basically this is going to be a very useful thing. You could store minor items like kunai or shuriken like Sasuke did in Shippuden. So yeah, they're not going to get use in it right now, but when sealing actually comes into play, that it might actually be pretty useful. So for distractions, finding enemy locations with paper bombs, creating your own paper bombs might actually be just cheaper than buying a paper bomb. Who knows? So I don't know. This would be non-crucial for now, and this would be around the time the next year would start, and instead of being put in the academy at the age of 6, Naruto and Shishui are put in at 5. Obviously, this is by request of 2 high-level Jonin / Anbu who want their children to do stuff. So after entering the academy, Naruto and Shishui already know things that they are teaching. They already know the basic jutsu, already have advanced fighting stances, already know the history and all that stuff, because Shishui's mother was teaching them this, because they're not just gonna learn to cook all day. Like, that's not something that's gonna happen. So she just basically taught them minor education. So I feel what would happen around this time is around the 6-month mark, where they would, or at least Shishui would turn, no, neither of them would turn 5 at this point. They would graduate and basically become the first 4-year-old genin. Obviously, this is gonna need very special care and aren't just put on any old squad. They're actually put in a high Jonin level squad, which is actually Mikoto Uchiha. So along with them graduating early, there was a girl a little older than them. Not really that much. She was around, I'd say, 9 to 10. So this girl, her name is Mei Kurama. She is a clanless, obviously. She comes from a civilian family, just like Lee and Tenten, but she is a prodigy just like Mikoto, and people had high hopes for her. Because she's female, she's just a little smaller than people her age, which means she's around the same size as Naruto and Shishui, who are actually a lot bigger than they're supposed to be. So they all look around the same, and because of their young bodies, they obviously need special treatment. So they would obviously, or actually what I would say is they are about to be put under Mikoto Uchiha, which is actually Itachi and Sasuke's mom, and around this time Itachi would be 3, so we can't really play with him right now. So basically Mikoto would be placed as their Jonin sensei because her labor time had been done, and she was an elite Jonin, and it was confirmed that she had the Mangekyo, so she could be pretty useful within a sticky situation, especially during a war where we basically can't afford to lose anyone, and Shishui having the one Tomo Sharingan could really benefit from someone with the Mangekyo teaching them. So obviously Mikoto wouldn't actually lead towards neither Naruto or Shishui because they seem to be progressing much faster than Mei, because they have people that are really advanced teaching them. So what Mikoto decides to do is take on Mei as her personal student. Mikoto has a very strange fighting style in this one and uses a lot of medical type ninjutsu, not really medical ninjutsu, but creates half blades out of chakra, which is basically very long chakra scalpels. So yeah, very medical based. She would teach these things to Mei, who actually also catches on within the next few months, where I'd say about 3 months would have passed and it would be October at this point. The team would have already had something about 50 50, yeah, about 50 D ranks under their belt, because that seems appropriate. Naruto and Shishui had actually been training a lot more. Instead of learning new things, they decided to expand on their arsenal that already exists and improve it. Shishui had an idea of using his Sharingan to balance out the tunnel vision of, the body flicker, because he body flickers Shishui, and was actually trying to teach Naruto a way to get around it too, because Naruto had a very high sentry ability and could even sense Amo level people thanks to Minato helping him. What Naruto basically does is something unique. One day while watching basically Amo use the burst aura, which he usually uses if he just wants to get someone off of him, he saw one doing something similar. They basically used a long range burst aura, which went about 7 to 8 feet in all directions, all cardinal directions, to basically see what was in the surrounding. This Amo also saw someone beneath them, or felt someone beneath them using their chakra. This wasn't really a chakra sonar like Iruka's, but it will someday get there, which basically means that it doesn't really mean anything. So Naruto would see this and start practicing it himself. So it's around this time where basically Naruto and Shishui would start working on the body flicker. Obviously they have very low reserves and just want to expand on it. In the 3 months that passed, they went with their chakra reserves alone up many leagues. So what would actually happen is, straight up, they would have high reserves. I'd say Shishui would break into the Amo levels, with the Naruto even breaking into the Kage levels because of him being able to push his reserves even further to be able to achieve higher levels of reserves. So I feel Naruto would be in the low Kage level at this point. So Naruto and Shishui would have high amounts of reserves and would use basically the body flicker 5 to 6 times within a sparring match. They're not body flicker Shishui level, like they can't spam it as much as they want, but they're getting pretty close. It actually doesn't have anything to do with chakra reserves at this point, it's just how maneuverable it is. Naruto wastes a lot of chakra in basically expanding an area around him to feel where everything is, so that he doesn't, just run into a tree using the body flicker, because he still can't really see. And Shishui had evolved his Sharingan into the 2-tomo, which he actually has to push a lot of chakra in to basically see while using the body flicker, because it's not as effective as the 3-tomo like he had in canon and the Mangekyo he had in canon. So it's extremely nerfed, if you know what I mean. It's just basically to close big gaps between opponents faster than they would, giving them a small advantage over their opponent. They also basically learned something from watching Minato and Shishui's father spar, which is enhancing weapons with chakra, which they had also started practicing. And having this high level of chakra reserves, they actually minorly break through it. They can basically do it inside the blade, but not surround the blade like someone like Asuma does. But they will eventually get there. So last time we left off with Naruto and Shishui and Mei Kurama, the name for all my OC females that play a leading role. So they basically became Genin, and for the previous 3 months they've been training excessively, with the Naruto and Shishui basically using chakra control like abilities like the body flicker, sentry ninjutsu, and even just amping weapons and things like that to minor degrees to give themselves an advantage over people with bigger bodies, obviously, since they're still technically around 5 at this point. So yeah, they're still mere children, but because of the harsh conditioning of their training, I'd say they'd physically be around 9, which isn't really much of an improvement, but in the shinobi world, yes, that would be a massive improvement. So they'd actually be pretty capable, I believe. Mei basically learned from Itachi's mom, which is Fugaku's wife. I can't remember her name right now. Mikoto Uchiha, I think? Yeah, it's Mikoto. So Mikoto would have taught Mei to use medical-like ninjutsu, which uses enhanced or just like chakra scalpels to some degree, but it's longer, so it's more like a chakra sword to basically cut the arteries within people's arms. And it's actually more effective than a blade because you can cut the chakra flow to have the blade flow through it and then just enhance the chakra flow to cut through someone's arm. So it's actually pretty useful. So Naruto and his team are all on the same level. They're pretty much getting high getting to low Chunin level at best. And I already see some smartass saying in the comments, the Chunin exams would have been passed by this point. Why didn't you actually? Yeah, because it's every 6 months. It would have happened like 2 months ago. But I'm gonna not do that because there's still 5, mind you. It wouldn't make sense to put them in the Chunin exams at this point. I'm gonna just postpone that. So they have 50 D ranks under their belt, so I feel they're probably capable of doing a few C ranks. They would start off their C rank adventure for the next 3 months to complete the year and encounter a couple of B ranks within hidden in the C ranks. So obviously Mikoto would take charge with the B ranks, but would leave any C rank criminals or shinobi, even Chunin level shinobi, to the kids because yeah, why not? They need to gain experience anyways. So she would be a very hands-off teacher when it comes to Naruto and Shishui, but very hands-on when it comes to Mei. Sure, she shouldn't be picking favorites, but it's not really picking favorites. It's trying to help Mei stay with her team, because Mikoto, more than anyone, knows that these two 5-year-old boys are prodigies beyond the likes. So, once again, over these 3 months, they'd probably be training with Shishui's father, Minato, and I feel even, maybe even, probably even, to be honest, Kushina. So Naruto would never get the Kekkei Genkai still lacking canon. He wouldn't really get the chakra chains, and Shishui would eventually prevail because he just got his Tutomoe, if y'all remember. And this is around the time that Naruto and Shishui would actually be taught something. So obviously their elements are tested, and Naruto has a high wind affinity and Shishui has a natural high fire affinity. Obviously there are more chakra natures, but focus on the main ones for now. Obviously this leaves room for a lot of improvement since both Minato and Shishui's father have high leveled both wind and fire style jutsu because those are their affinities, Minato obviously having some more. So this also leaves open some good long range and short range combos. So obviously Shishui would be focusing on fire style attacks and Naruto on wind style. Shishui would finally start the tradition of the Uchiha fire style fireball jutsu, fire style great fireball jutsu, and fire style great expanse, which is actually a Jonin level technique which some Uchihas never learned. Obviously Minato would also not want Naruto to fall behind, so to encompass the fire styles, he would basically learn Gale Palm to enhance them. Then he would also learn Wind Blades or Wind Bullets, depending on what y'all want. I think I should do Wind Bullets, so he would get Wind Bullets, Wind Style Wind Bullets. And then for his third move to encompass Fire Style Great Breakthrough, Naruto would learn Wind Style Great Breakthrough, which are actually two opposite jutsu. Basically just sending a massive gust of wind and a massive wall of fire out from the person's chakra coils. So sure, this has some breakthrough since it is a C to B rank technique, but it is very effective within a battle. Not really throughout the entire battle, but if you get into a tough spot, sure, you'll get a little hurt, but you'll probably hurt the enemy to a much greater degree. Obviously this needs a lot of chakra, so over this time not only going on C and B ranked missions, hunting missions, assassination missions, and even training with two of the most elite Jonin within the Leaf, they obviously get further. Until something happens. They are basically told to go out. So once they go out, something happens to Naruto. Naruto, Shishui, and Mei are all split up at this point because the mission requires them to be at different places. when Naruto is ambushed by a group of, I'd say, Chunin level, because why not? But there are like 4 of them, so Naruto can't really handle it without Shishui there. Naruto gets very badly injured because these were all medical ninjutsu based fighters, so something like Kabuto's team from the Chunin exams, they would cut Naruto's arteries within his arms, legs, neck, so Naruto can't actually move at this point. And he doesn't have the healing factor of the Nine Tails like he did in canon. This is when they would realize something's off, and Shishui would spam basically the body flicker for the first time and appear in front of Naruto, and then use a fire style great breakthrough, with Naruto seeing it coming, had barely been able to get his hands together and form some seals for the 1 style great breakthrough, which was just perfectly timed to basically almost scorch them to death. So they were brutally scorched and laying on the ground, but still alive, with 1 or 2 of them dead, and Naruto basically crying out of happiness that Shishui saved him. Also, Shishui seemed furious that these people had touched Naruto. Obviously, he had also become really obsessive with Naruto because this is like his brother. Around the time they return to the Leaf, and Naruto, even though he has the Uzumaki healing factor, this isn't that much. So after a while, Mei decides she's gonna become a medical ninja. So she would start as a medical ninja and start, I don't know, she'd basically start doing medical ninjutsu. Like, she'd go work at the hospital, which obviously means she's not going to spend as much time with her Genin squad. Obviously, this only forts their squad even more, and Naruto, Shishui, and obviously their sensei are demoted to only doing low C ranks, no more B ranks or high C ranks, because of Naruto's fresh injuries. But when they are promoted to Chunin, they might be doing high B rank missions. Because, just mind you, Naruto is still around 5 to 6 at this point. But also, Minato won't be teaching them as much, since Minato had recently gotten a new squad, being Obito and Rin added to Kakashi. Obviously, Kakashi doesn't really want anything to do with Obito and doesn't really mind Rin at this point, but is still really obsessive over Naruto. So this is gonna be an overprotective character for Kakashi, because to him, the only people that matter right now are Minato Sensei, Kushina, and obviously Naruto. So once he finally gets back, because Kakashi had been on a streak of missions recently, even when Kakashi or Minato hasn't. Kakashi had been promoted to Chunin, mind you, and has actually been put on assassination missions on a constant because he doesn't have anything better to do. So he just did it. Around this point is when he finds out about Naruto and decides to teach Naruto himself, since he sees Naruto, his sensei, isn't doing much. And Kakashi had been working on that one jutsu, which is the lightning blade, which he can't really use because of the tunnel vision, but he had one day seen Naruto use the body flicker actually pretty well without feeling the effects of the tunnel vision. So he asked Naruto what Naruto does. Naruto explains because of his big chakra reserves, he can make a net around him that lasts 2 or 3 seconds, which he can feel everything within the proximity. So he can replace the vision with that, but it's really hard to learn. Obviously, Kakashi wants to learn it, and in return for Naruto teaching Kakashi this technique, Kakashi would in turn teach Naruto what he's learned about the Chidori, because this is based on the Rasengan, and Minato doesn't really see it fit to teach children the Rasengan, but whatever. So Naruto would basically have something new up his sleeve, while Shishui also is working on something else. Shishui is actually leaning towards creating his own jutsu. He has been basically taught how to add fire to his sword when he came up with an idea. What if he could just add fire to any weapon as long as he had a chakra string attached to it? So sure, this isn't gonna come in handy when it comes to Jonin level fighters, but he might be able to kill a few Chunin. So he basically, over the next month they have off, trains by attaching chakra strings with amounts of fire chakra to things like shuriken and kunai, and would throw them and have them get to unbelievable amounts of heat. Instead of physically showing the fire, people who think they can catch it would really be hurt by it, and then as soon as they think they're gonna drop it, he could use the chakra string to cut their throat. Because Shishui is getting really cold at this point, because he's getting really unhealthily obsessed with Naruto. Yes, I'm gonna break Shishui's character a little bit, but forgive me for that. So last time we left off with Shishui creating the molten skin metal technique, or fire style, the molten skin metal jutsu, which is basically him adding chakra strings to ninja tools, throwing them towards their opponent, and in an obvious way for the opponent to catch it, then sending vicious amounts of fire chakra through the string all the way into the metal, making it burn at very high temperatures, and obviously making them drop it, then using the rest of the chakra string to pull it, basically to slit their throat or to enlarge it within a leg or something to really hurt the opponent, if you know what I mean. So Naruto had also started teaching Kakashi his sentry ability, where a few feet around him he can basically sense anything in that proximity, but only for a circumference of around a second. So it's not really battle worth, but for something like the Chidori that amps your speed that much, plus having the body flicker, it could really be useful. So in return, Kakashi had taught the incomplete lightning blade slash Chidori to Naruto. So obviously Naruto's gonna work on this a little more, but he struggles catching onto it, and when he eventually does, he can't help but show it off. Obviously Shishui still keeps up his happy-go-lucky personality, or just his happy serious personality around Naruto, but then turns completely dark to anyone else that might not be of concern. He'd act happy to Naruto, sometimes to Kuruma, who is their teammate by the way, but they don't see her as much, and even to their sensei. Maybe to his parents he'd act a little strange, but to anyone outside of that group, he would be a vicious, merciless person. He would tell you to fuck off and shit like that. So Shishui is really different from where he was in canon, and is in a really bad mental state because of Naruto almost dying and Naruto being basically his brother. Obviously Kakashi is in a similar state because he wasn't there to protect his little brother, or at least didn't teach his little brother anything that could protect himself. Obviously Kakashi at this point doesn't have any interest in Obito or Rin because he's more worried about Naruto, so he just wants to complete this jutsu and get it over with, so that he could teach Naruto something that can defend him. Obviously Shishui wants to learn this technique, and Naruto would basically teach it to him, with Shishui using the Sharingan to basically copy a worse version of it, because the more you copy something, the worse it gets. So it's even worse than Naruto's and small Kakashi's, but it still does a lot of impact and is easily a high C to low B rank technique, and finally gives them something for close range and arsenal. Naruto obviously doesn't use something like a sword like Shishui does, because Shishui does use a fire and short sword, something his father taught him, and Naruto had also recently started learning how to add the wind chakra nature to a blade to make it longer slash sharper, and he basically does that with kunai because he doesn't really feel comfortable using a sword. So what would happen over the next few months once again is we're gonna switch over to Kakashi and his team. Things would go for about the next 5 months as they would in canon, or yeah, around that time, until Obito would be presumably dead. Kakashi would be left off in an even worse mental state, almost having Naruto die and actually having Obito die, who he had started opening up to and actually fell for. So he feels really bad now that Obito is dead. And this would be around the time him and Rin return to the village. Obviously Kakashi now has a one-tomo Sharingan and basically is sulking in Minato's apartment most of the time. Naruto in this time gets to know Rin and actually figures out, because of some subtle things Shishui's dropping, that Shishui's personality is really changing a lot from the Shishui he knew back then. He decided he will confront him later, but for now he's gonna basically try and emotionally support Kakashi. So Naruto, within these few months, had actually unlocked the lightning chakra nature, so did Shishui. So they can actually both use lightning chakra and can still amp each other's jutsu and combos, with both of them learning how to create something called the lightning clone, which was actually developed by Kakashi and shown to Naruto, but Naruto couldn't do it because he didn't have a high enough lightning affinity. But actually Naruto and Shishui have 90% lightning affinities, which is actually more than very high. It is extremely high. Like, the second Hokage had a 65% water affinity, and he could use the water in the air. At least for this what if, because I need to do something unique to split this what if from the rest. So they would basically learn the Chidori and actually add their respective elements to it, because what Naruto basically did is he combined the Chidori with the Gale Palm. So the Chidori obviously needs hand signs, but Naruto figured out how to stall hand signs, so he would stall the Chidori until he pours lightning chakra, and then do the Gale Palm, which he would stall until he does air chakra. Naruto obviously at this point had a much higher chakra control rating than he did in canon. He already did most of the filler chakra control exercises, and even some ones we don't really get, and Naruto and Shishui would both have around Kage level chakra reserves. Obviously Shishui's personality is getting really twisted, so this might be starting to get a really bad idea. So it's around this time that Minato is really getting known, but Naruto was still only 6, so is Shishui. So not much is gonna come of this, except Itachi is showing up. But instead of Shishui being up and Itachi's friend, he's not even playing nice. Sure, he would take Itachi out to train, but instead of being the Shishui that smiles, he is a serious Shishui. That is really hard to say, that's a tongue twister. He would just basically take Itachi out. Sure, Itachi still likes his company, but when Itachi doesn't get something right, he gets scolded by Shishui instead of taught how to do it properly. Because Shishui doesn't care for Itachi, he cares for Naruto. So it's kind of a weird thing. And Itachi wants to keep pushing himself to catch up to Shishui, and he will eventually get there. But for now, Naruto and Shishui had basically done some stuff. Naruto basically launches as much chakra into his lightning blade as possible, and then basically shoots it in a dispersal, which would basically be his version of a lightning style great breakthrough. So sure, it doesn't have the same range, but it could be effective enough to paralyze someone in something like the Chunin exams, which is actually coming up. That's why Naruto actually made it. Shishui had actually learned something he calls the draining lightning technique, which he uses the Chidori and then cuts the chakra usage in half and creates the other hand in fire, which basically doesn't affect him, either one of them. And then he would basically slam both of them into the opponent, semi-paralyzing and semi-scorching them, which would actually freeze them in place because of not only pain but actual paralyzation. And then the lightning would slowly but surely drain their chakra. Not really slowly, but definitely surely. So something similar to Hinata's twin line technique. Obviously not as effective. It wouldn't really be effective against a Jonin, but maybe a high gaining low Chunin. So once again, very useful technique for something like the Chunin exams. When Naruto was talking to basically Kakashi, who had finally came out of his room, and Rin, we see Shishui's face getting really twisted. Around this time, things are gonna start getting uncomfortable. So Shishui is mentally unstable at this point. He's not really mentally unstable, more self-induced mentally unstable. He's obsessing over Naruto and plotting against people like Kakashi and Rin, and it's actually Itachi that figured this out. Itachi saw his room and bored while he wasn't home about all the stuff Shishui's planning on doing. It's not like really hurting them, it's a bit like, it's like betraying, backstabbing. It's not killing anyone. It's more like blackmail. So Itachi knows Naruto. He's seen Naruto. He knows Shishui really likes Naruto. He doesn't really know why, but he knows Shishui holds Naruto in high regard. So what Itachi decides to do, and this is still a 4-year-old Itachi, mind you, who is actually really smart. He decides to take this to Naruto. Naruto, after seeing this, confronts Shishui. Obviously, Shishui would try and talk out of it like, hey, I'm doing it for your good. And Naruto would be like, I don't want you to. I like these people. They're just as close to me as you are. They're family, just like you are. This really touches Shishui, and even though his yandere personality is gonna keep up a little, it's gonna cool down, at least for now. And this would ensue with Naruto and Shishui catching up with some training and being reunited with their basically teammate Mei Kurama, because she doesn't really want to enter the Chunin exams. She doesn't really care. But there is another genin who is also an early graduate. He graduated at the age of, I don't know, 10? He would be around 10 at this point, and he is Iruka. So this is obviously Iruka, and instead of him graduating after the Nine Tails attack, he would have basically graduated early. So he is younger than Kakashi, so he has to graduate early, and he is put on their team. They would get to know Iruka, and it turns out that Iruka had actually created his own jutsu, even though people didn't really like him in the academy. Naruto would ask what it is, and basically demonstrate the jutsu him and Shishui have created, and then Iruka just wants to show off, and he explains what it is, but he can only use it once because of his low reserves. This is the, obviously once again from Better Left Unsaid, the fanfiction. This is chakra echolocation. Naruto takes a strong interest in this because it could strongly improve the brutal technique he's using now that actually drains a lot of chakra. So after a while of Naruto picking stuff up, he has a smaller range than Iruka, but he can't keep it up constantly. He can send out 4 or 5 blasts at most because it does take a lot of chakra either way, and he still needs to get mentally used to what it does. And he can't really keep up with it mentally because it really messes around with him. So the Chunin exams would come up. So last time we left off, we were about to start the Chunin exam. So this time we should probably just continue where we left off. So we did confirm that Iruka did start training with Naruto and Shishui over the next 3-month period to the next Chunin exams. In this time period, Shishui would calm down a little bit, but his yandere personality is still sticking out. Don't get too close to Naruto or your ass is gonna get beat. Sure, he doesn't have romantic interest towards Naruto, but he just feels like he needs to protect Naruto. It's almost like a sibling slash best friend type of thing. There's not gonna be a Shishui x Naruto ship. Sorry, I just don't do that. Then Iruka, obviously. Shishui kind of likes Iruka. He thinks he's kind of cool. Similar to how he doesn't really mind Kakashi. Sure, he did plan some nasty ass shit for Kakashi. He didn't mind him that much now. So Shishui had calmed down a lot, but his character is about to really shine through. During this Chunin exams, which taking inspiration from Better Left Unsaid once again, they would basically be taken to an exam where they would basically be locked up in different rooms. So 2 people from the squad would get to basically torture one person from the other squad without physically like hurting them. It should be mental torture. Till they give the passcode of the other squad, which is obviously only known by the person getting tortured, mentally tortured technically. And what they decide to do, Shishui obviously wanted to send Iruka, but Naruto actually volunteered because Naruto would actually be the most mentally stable. Iruka would be the clown type. Shishui is currently going through some mental stuff, and Naruto has a strong will. That's why he hasn't given up yet. That's why he will always break through. So Shishui and Iruka didn't even bother torturing these people because they know Naruto would get the other team's code or password or whatever. So Naruto after a while would get bored and then just at these people's futile attempts at threatening to cut his balls off, stuff like that, he would just use wind style chakra to break through the ropes and then just beat the absolute living shit out of the two trying to torture him until they gave him the code. He would come out with the code, impressing Ibiki since no other team has done this. Plus, they did it within the first minute, or the first 2 minutes actually. So they did it actually the fastest. So this was it for the mental test. The reason they're doing this is because other villages at this point in the war would capture you and torture you, so they want to make sure that their Chunins are optimal against torture and can handle themselves in any situation. Obviously, this was the outcome Ibiki wanted to see, so he passes Naruto's team, and then they would go on to the next round. Only a few teams would pass, none that really make any difference, because Kakashi and Rin are not even in this one. Asuma and what's her face? Asuma and his girlfriend would be in here with their teammate, whoever he was. I think a bunch of the senseis at this point would be in here, like Kakashi, Ibisu. Kakashi isn't gonna be in it, but like Guy, Ibisu, obviously Iruka is in Naruto's team. I don't even know, just think of all the Jonin senseis, they'd basically be in here. So after that, Naruto would move on to the second round, which would be something similar to the Forest of Death, but obviously killing is not allowed. They would take out a few teams and then be put out to the finals. Naruto's team is basically done good for teamwork because Iruka would be the center of the team, with Naruto and Shishui basically doing big high scale jutsu to take out the opponents without killing them. So they would basically be praised for this. And obviously all the attention would be on them. The Jonin senseis will be watching, or the current Jonin senseis would be watching Naruto's team mainly through the Hokage's crystal ball or something similar. So basically they would be watching Naruto's team because that would probably be the most interesting team. Y'all know this. And when they get to the finale, it's all three of them that passed. I'd say Guy, Ibisu, and Asuma, because Asuma's team wouldn't have wanted to enter, so Asuma had to come with these people. At this point, I think Guy's dad would already be dead. Or not, I'm not really sure. No, Guy was a Chunin, so yeah, his dad wouldn't be dead yet. And I'd say a few other teams that don't really matter would be there and would be taken out until we get to the semifinals. In the semifinals, it would be Naruto versus Guy, Shishui versus Iruka, and then Ebisu versus Asuma. This is going to be the main, basically, group up. So after fighting it out, Naruto, Shishui, and Guy would come out on top. So now it would be a 3v3, but there was actually one other candidate that got in, but there wasn't enough space to fit him, so he was put through to the last moment. This would obviously be technically a spy of some sort, because I'd say Tenzin would have been released by Orchimaru, or Yamato as some might know him, and he would be put up against Asuma, or first he'd be put up against Shishui, and Naruto against Guy, because Asuma's already eliminated. So Shishui's fight with Yamato would be kind of complicated. Obviously people are now rooting for Yamato because of wood style. They haven't seen this in a long time, but Shishui, using fire style and very enhanced fire style at that, is able to get around the wood style barriers and eventually spam body flicker enough to knock out Yamato. Then the fight between Naruto and Guy would come up. Obviously this would be the most interesting. Obviously Guy has the size advantage, and I believe he'd be able to open up to the third gate. Even though Guy would rather save this for the finale, he doesn't really know Naruto's strength, because Naruto actually took out the rest of the people pretty easily. So he would open the first gate obviously and drop his weight. They would go into a hand-to-hand clash, being pretty even. Guy would see this and then, without wasting any stamina, would try and put up to the second gate. This would still not really phase Naruto, but when Guy does open the third gate, Naruto starts getting pushed back. And eventually he can't really take the taijutsu fight and starts going into long range attacks with Guy dodging almost every one. Naruto and Guy would go to the point where Naruto is exhausted and Guy is physically exhausted. So Naruto finally sees an opening in Guy's martial arts and then uses 3 body flickers immediately after each other, basically spamming them to get into that weak spot and kick Guy's leg. So he doesn't break the leg like Lee's was, but he does hurt Guy enough to the point where he basically just gets knocked out because he kicked him with enough force to yeet him against the wall, and Guy basically got knocked out. So now it would be Naruto versus Shishui. But before that could happen, let's have a quick intermission. Have you subscribed yet? I know you haven't subscribed yet, but it's not too late. You can subscribe right now by clicking the red button down below. Intermission over. So Naruto and Shishui's fight would actually go pretty quick, with Shishui eventually just letting Naruto win. Obviously the third Hokage would eventually see this and actually know that logically Shishui should have won because he had more chakra and many other factors actually played into account right there. So what would end up happening is the following people would be promoted to Chunin. It would be Naruto, it would be Shishui, and it would be Guy. So this is where the arc would happen with Guy's dad dying, so Guy's still a Chunin. Obviously, Obito died a little early for this, but he had to still die in order for my story to progress as it did.
The newly found Chunin see themselves in the Hokage office where they are presented with their first mission. They are going to be going directly into war as they are in deep trouble. They have found that some Genin squads from other villages had made themselves comfortable in the land of fire. So they would be sent out in platoons, with these new Chunin having to adapt to becoming captains. There would be at least one Chunin who had been in charge of platoons before, who would be in each group. Team Alpha would be Kakashi, Hatake, and Rin as the leaders, and would be followed by a platoon of Genin. They would be put on scout, and they would just need to keep the coast clear. Second platoon, aka Team Beta, would be in charge by Shishui Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki. Following them would be their co-captain, Asuma Sarutobi. Now for the last team, it would be led by Might Guy. His co-captain, unknown. His platoon of Genin. They would be put to patrol the forest. If they would need any help, their superior in this mission would be Minato Namikaze, the current leader of the war, and he would stay back, if not be put out to another mission if it is not too dangerous. They would set out, and shortly after, the Leaf would receive a message saying that that platoon is heading into straight death. They had found multiple high-level signatures, that of near Kage level. They didn't really have any Jonin or Chunin they could send out, and they didn't really know what to do. Hiruzen would prepare to set out himself when Might Die, a well-known Genin within the village, would offer to come along. Obviously, Hiruzen would be hesitant since he doesn't know any Genjutsu or Ninjutsu, so what help could he be? He would insist though and make his way along. The group would split off into sections as they need to follow up. Naruto, Shishui, and Asuma, their entire platoon would come out safe. They would have been encountered with a group of Genin, slightly larger than their own, but no trouble at all. They would make their way to Platoon A or Alpha, where they would meet Kakashi. They would arrive as Shishui would appear in a body flicker along with Naruto to stop Kakashi connecting his hand to Rin's chest. They also spot someone they had believed to be dead up until now in the forest line. The person to make eye contact would be Naruto. He would see someone he saw as an older brother, being Obito, with a bleeding eye standing in the forest line, hair grown out in a weird costume. He'd scream out, "Obito, is that you?" As Obito would fall to the ground, fainting from exhaustion, he had unlocked his Mangekyo thinking that Kakashi was about to kill Rin. They would launch over, grabbing him. Kakashi stood there in shock. Not only did he almost kill Rin, but did he just hear Obito's alive? The two would make their way to see Obito lying there unconscious. They'd be flabbergasted as a figure would jump out the wood. It was half covered in white and half covered in black. It referred to itself as Zetsu, and it would try to stop them. They'd easily dispel of this creature and take them back to the leaf. On their way back, they would run into Hiruzen, who had thought that they meant certain death. Kakashi would say that there was a platoon of Chunin awaiting them. Naruto's platoon came out safe, but they're not sure about Guy. Hiruzen says that Guy's father, Dai, had went after him. Back over there, we see Guy and his platoon encountering the 7 ninja swordsmen, multiple having already died, some left standing. Might Dai would arrive telling his son and his platoon to make their way back to the leaf. Guy would obviously know his father is not strong enough and try and keep him back. But Dai would insist, knocking out his son and letting one of his teammates take him back. He would trigger the 8th gate, something that would ensure your death, but could make even the weakest of opponents, that of Kage level. He would fight off the 7 ninja swordsmen, successfully killing 6 of them, leaving only 1, who would take the blade and return to the mist in a near-dead state. When Hiruzen's team, now left of Naruto, Shishui, and Asuma, and Hiruzen himself, would come across, they would find Dai burnt to a crisp. They would ask if it was fire jutsu, but Hiruzen would reveal that it was the forbidden technique of the 8 gates. He had perished, saving dozens. They would make their way back to the leaf with all the bodies that had been left behind, sealed in scrolls, including those of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Maybe they can use them for information. As they get to the leaf, they had seen an entire army of Jonin assembled by Minato. He had split up from his group, for 2,000 shinobi had been on the border. He had found them after they had triggered one of his seals. He had killed every single one.
And not just the men, but the women and the children too.
They thought that there might be a second attack, especially where Hiruzen will be heading, so they had prepared just in case. Hiruzen, seeing that this is the case, that on multiple fronts they had been attacked, he would call for a council meeting that would happen later that night. The council would consist of the 3rd Hokage, the clan leaders, and the village elders, along with the civilian council. This meeting would have been called to determine what is going on in the battlefield, and the 3rd Hokage would be accompanied by Minato Namikaze, captain of the group that had encountered the 2,000 shinobi. When the meeting got called, obviously in asking why they were called, something would have happened to prompt Hiruzen's response. It would be delayed as a knock at the council door would be sought with a scroll from seemingly the cloud. When the scroll would be opened, it would be revealed that this is not only from the cloud but also from the rock. They had requested that there'd be a truce. Minato Namikaze had killed a joint forces of 2,000 of both villages shinobi, being 750 cloud shinobi and the rest stone shinobi, all at least Jonin level. This would prompt obviously any commander to pull back his army, for that is a devastating loss, especially in high-ranking elite soldiers, prompting a reaction out of the council like no other. They currently do need someone to represent hope within the village, and Minato would be perfect. They would schedule an arrangement to where they would reward Minato for, taking care of all this, and would bestow upon him a title of Konoha's Flying Thunder God, or the Yellow Flash, as he would be put down in the data books, for he had killed 2,000 shinobi in a flash. This would obviously not be the only topic they would discuss. They would also discuss the standing on the war. They are currently allied with the Sand, who is their closest compatriot, and are having possible negotiations with the Mist, which had been broken as they found the 7 ninja swordsmen on their land, meaning that that truce is all but broken. Now they need to find a way to end this war. Both the Cloud and Stone had already retracted their participants in the war, and they don't think that the Mist would be cooperating any further. There is but one village they should consider, which they feel would also come to naught. So at this point, they just need to decide a victor of this war. And they think with Minato, they have so. They might have lost valuable shinobi in most of their Chunin and even some Jonin, but they had also defeated a lot of dangerous opponents, even regaining someone they had thought to be lost, Obito, who is currently in a comatose state within the hospital, along with his teammates Rin, who had been discovered to be the three-tailed Jinchuriki, and Kakashi, who had drained himself of chakra to the point where he is barely able to stand. What this will come down to meaning is that they didn't really take too many negatives. They were the most positive out of this circumstance, apart from the Sand, who did not participate in this altercation at all. So, did the Leaf win this war? They don't know. They'd have to call a 5 Kage summit to be able to officially end the war, which they just might do. Hiruzen would eventually persuade the council to agree upon him to call a 5 Kage summit, where they will try and declare the end of the war in either a tie or a victory for themselves. Then they need to negotiate with the Mist to keep Rin, because they don't want to lose any of their shinobi. In Bronx, they would basically forget the entire 7 sword situation and have an alliance set up with them, which I'm pretty sure the Mist would be obligated to do, as they are not currently under Yagura's rule, and their Kage might have died within this war. Who knows? Still have times are about to get peaceful. Not much is going to happen from here on out, because the war had seemingly ended, meaning that obviously we had Minato killing 2,000 shinobi, we had the 7 ninja swordsmen taken out, and we also have a newly found alliance with the Rain Village because of Danzo coming to terms with Hanzo the Salamander. Meaning the Leaf is pretty much in a winning situation. Sure, the Sand wasn't really touched for their alliance with the Leaf early on, but they're not really above anyone else. They have their Jinchuriki and all, who's kinda old, so they can't really rely on him, and they also don't really have that large of a military force currently. So they're kinda just hanging back. After the 5 Kage summit was called, all the villages would have basically given up the war, meaning that technically the Leaf is the winners, but how they made it happen is to basically say that no matter how it went down, it's a tie, even though it's not. The Leaf kind of won, but whatever. The Leaf had started negotiations while in the 5 Kage summit with the Mist, who had no current Kage, meaning it was council members there. These council members were already in a lot of stress, and when the Leaf persisted to continue the war if they did not relinquish the 3 tails, the Mist kind of had to fold, because without the 3 tails they didn't really have a weapon, because they failed when implanting the 3 tails into Rin, and they also failed when it came to the 7 ninja swordsmen. They really lost more in this war than any other village. So after accepting it, they would basically just disband. The Leaf would go back to peaceful times, not really wanting to cause war, and the other villages would slowly plot to once again start something to defeat the Leaf. Obviously, still allied, we have the Land of Stone and the Land of Clouds, or I don't really know what it's called, the Cloud Village. I'm just gonna say that. Stone Village and the Cloud Village. They still gonna be teamed up. They still gonna try and find ways to get rid of the Leaf. But here's where things are gonna be off. We still have 2 years before the initial start of Naruto. So what's gonna go on? The war had just stopped, and missions aren't gonna be as common as you thought. Maybe by the few rogues that are scattered around. It seemed to have been a time of peace, but it wasn't quite so. All of the villages didn't quite retract, having obviously the stone and cloud still have some spies in the leaf. So what they decide to do early on is try to get an Uchiha and a Hyuga to try and get more people with dojutsu, do their scientific experiments, all that. So something's gonna happen. A random Hyuga will be kidnapped and maybe experimented on. I'm gonna let the Hyuga go and let that Hyuga be captured, but obviously the cage bird seal would activate and that Hyuga would die. This is how I'm gonna say they know about the cage bird seal, knowing to go after a noble, all that type of stuff, which would trigger events later on in Naruto. Also, when it comes to kidnapping Uchiha, they kind of wanted a mature Uchiha that already unlocked their 3 Tomoe and possibly their Mangekyo. Within the leaf, there are a few shinobi that had unlocked the Mangekyo, and even fewer known. The obviously most known ones would be Fugaku Uchiha, and then the other would be Shishui's dad in this specific case. Shishui's dad had suffered some really bad injuries within the war after a strong battle, and is in pretty bad condition. He can barely walk and move after a large battle with a platoon of about 100 shinobi, and he's just living out his days in the leaf. It's not like he doesn't have enough money to survive. And this is when things will go down. Naruto and Shishui was in a training session at the Namikaze compound / Uzumaki compound, because yes, I'm going to be giving them something called a compound, blah blah blah, clan house, whatever you want to call it. That's where they're going to be training. They would have scheduled to meet up with Shishui's parents to have a picnic somewhere in a field, blah blah blah, training ground somewhere. And this is when something will happen. The spy that was sent to kidnap an Uchiha with 3 Tomoe would have found out about Shishui's dad possibly having the Mangekyo and also having suffered really bad injuries. So he'd obviously make Shishui's father his target. It had not been too long since the war was over, so Shishui's dad is still in that position, barely healed at all, and Shishui's mother isn't really a fighter, she's just a normal civilian. So by the time this shinobi attacks them, they're pretty much defenseless. Naruto and Shishui would land to only see Shishui's mother's throat being slit. Shishui would scream out as his eyes start bleeding as he charges forward to attack the shinobi. He would get into a hand-to-hand combat situation with the shinobi and seemingly overpower them until he gets off-guarded. He gets stabbed seemingly in the heart. They don't necessarily know if it landed, but Shishui's father would scream out as he activated his EMS. He would basically scream for Naruto to get Shishui to a doctor, which Naruto was shocked more than anyone that Shishui of all people got stabbed. He would mindlessly grab Shishui and start jumping as Shishui's father and the other shinobi would fight. Naruto, after getting Shishui to a doctor, would decide to return to see how if Shishui's dad had won or not. He had used his Mangekyo and killed the opponent, but got stabbed in the gut at the same time. Naruto had taken a little too long to be able to help him, and he started bleeding out. There's no way of saving him. Naruto would get there as he coughs up blood, and Naruto would have a quick altercation between each other. He would tell Naruto, or instruct Naruto, to take his eyes, put them in a jar as he goes through some hand seals, summoning a crow with the jar. He'd tell Naruto to put it in there, and then just wait till Shishui has properly unlocked his Mangekyo, then give him this. He doesn't want him to be rejected. This will give him the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, or the MS. Now, Naruto would scream out in anger. One of the people he considered family had died, and he doesn't even want to know in what type of pain Shishui will be after knowing he just lost both his mother and father. Naruto would cry as he took out a somewhat father figure eyes and putting them in a jar. He'd then jump away to Shishui's bedroom, where he'd spend the night. Shishui would eventually wake up after being healed and would ask Naruto what happened. Naruto would quickly once again tear up, telling Shishui exactly what went down. He didn't make it in time. Shishui didn't even cry. His face seemed straight, but it wasn't. Internally, he was bawling his eyes out. He was in such deep shock that he couldn't even bring himself to cry. He just lost his parents. Like, what is he gonna do after this? Who's gonna care about him? As he passes out once again. Not too long after this, some Anbu would appear at the bedroom trying to figure out what happened to Naruto. The Uchiha clan have some specific rules regarding the Sharingan, as the Sharingan shall be removed and returned to either a family member or the clan head. Shishui being alive means that they hope Shishui has his eyes. Naruto would say that yes, Shishui has, and would ask them not to bother Shishui as he explained exactly how the entire altercation went. The Amo officers would leave, having thought they had gotten all the information, while Shishui would eventually wake up, leave the hospital fully healed, but mentally he'd be unstable. He would not even think about taking the Sharingan his dad had left behind and planting it in his own eyes to activate his EMS. He didn't really do this for the fact of EMS. He did this because he wanted to have a piece of his dad a part of him. He didn't really know what to do with his eyes, so he just put them back into the jar. Naruto would see him do this and confront him when he had an idea. He would ask Naruto to implant his old Sharingan within himself. It is now about 2 years before the canonical Ninetales attack. This is going to be a training period. Obviously, Naruto and Shishui can't just tell anyone about what they did, for the Uchiha clan would basically freak the hell out, and I'm pretty sure some of the village elders would too. So they decide to tell a select few in Minato, Kushina, Kakashi, Rin, and Obito for being like family to them, and then Iruka, because they feel he could really help Naruto, and the fact that Naruto has to hide his Sharingan, and he can't just cover both his eyes. Like, he's probably going to either be squinting or just keeping his eyes shut, using Iruka's technique, at least from Better Left Unsaid, called the chakra echolocation technique, and maybe expand upon it. As y'all might know, Iruka had graduated early in this what if, and he had actually become a Chunin. So I'm going to keep him as a Chunin, and after this 2-year training period, he might go up, who knows. But for the most part, it's going to be Naruto and Shishui training. Minato would eventually be crowned as Hokage, or named Hokage, I guess, not really crowned, but point is, he would be Hokage. More things that would happen is Obito would have basically trained with Kakashi so that Kakashi could unlock his Mangekyo, and they had started training on it together. Rin had become a perfect Jinchuriki, and much more has actually happened in the world. Naruto and Shishui had mastered their body flicker techniques, and Naruto had gotten basically his Mangekyo down. Like, he never had Sharingan, so he had to master Sharingan in the first place, and then he had to master Mangekyo. His Sharingan was not stuck in the Mangekyo stage, it was stuck in the 3-tomo stage, with him able to go up to Mangekyo, just so that y'all know. But this is where things get rather interesting. Attacks would start happening at random. First, an attack on the sand. The one Tails had disappeared from his cage, and no one had really known what happened, as these giant statues had been attacking. But as soon as they started landing hits, these statues just disappeared like they were clones. Afterwards, the Cloud would report both their 2 and 8 tails going missing, without an attack. And so the villages would either be attacked, or no attack would happen and their Jinchuriki would just go missing. The only 2 Jinchuriki left are Rin and Kushina, meaning the Leaf is the only village still there with their tailed beasts. Now it is time to prepare. It is about 6 months to the point where the Ninetales attack would happen, and they had basically accumulated that the attacks were random. So what Minato would decide to do is he would take Naruto and Shishui to Mount Nyaboku. he thinks that they might be the only two that could stop the Nine Tails. They, in this time, had discovered Shishui and Naruto's Mangekyo abilities. Shishui having an EMS version of basically his Koto Motsukami, I believe, or it could be said different, I'm not too sure, and Naruto just having the normal version. This would mean that they have the best genjutsu, period. Naruto would have the nerf of only being able to use it once every so odd years, while Shishui could just use it once every other day to week, depending on how we do it. They had also gotten their skeletal structures, complete skeletal structures for the Susanoo down, and had basically mastered that. On the other hand, Kakashi and Obito had become a fearsome duo, with them being able to create a joint Susanoo twice the size of a normal one, and would be shown to be able to use a lot more control. They would have Shuriken as the main weapon for their Susanoo, and anytime the Shuriken would hit something, it would create a Kamui rift inside of it. Having both of them had mastered their Sharingan, not to the utmost peak, but to some extent. Rin, on the other hand, had transformed into the Three Tails a few times, almost alluring villagers, but she would quickly transform back, showing her the trust between her and Isabu. So there is that. Now Minato would basically take Naruto and Shishui to go train on Mount Nyoboku, preparing for this threat. He would give a summoning scroll to basically Kakashi, saying that if anything happens to summon them. Kakashi would nod and they'd be off. Naruto and Shishui would start their training on Mount Nyoboku. Naruto, in this case, not having the Nine Tails, would be able to merge with the Toad. And in this specific circumstance, I'm going to say Ma and Pa would be either for Jiraiya or for Minato. I'm not going to have them bond to Naruto and Shishui. Instead, I'd have them have their own Toads, at least in this specific case.
And yes, I'm not going to use shadow clones. They will know the shadow clone jutsu, obviously, but I'm not going to have them use it in this specific case. I'm going to be letting them go throughout the entirety of the Sage Mode training without using Sharingan, all that type of shit. They need to actually get their Sage Mode done. They need to do this the right way. So they do everything, learn Frog Kumiti, I don't know how to say that. Frog Kung Fu, there you go. And they would get Sage Mode. They do the meditation training, all that type of stuff. They get it down. And this is where it starts getting interesting. They're not only going to stick to that. As we know, Naruto has a wind release nature and Shishui has a fire release nature. Minato would be interested to see if they could do what he couldn't because of the Sharingan. He could never infuse a nature type within the Rasengan, but that's what it was kind of meant for. So he'd take the liberty of teaching them the Rasengan. When something would happen, Minato would poof away, with Naruto and Shishui having just figured out how to actually pour chakra into their Rasengans, or nature chakra. Naruto forming the Rasen Shuriken, greatly damaging his arms, then healed by Toads, and Shishui having basically almost incinerated himself, basically creating something similar to a Scorch Rasengan. It's a highly fire-powered Rasengan that does a lot of fire damage. They would know that this isn't too perfect, but they're gonna need to do it. They just saw Minato pop away. They need to keep training. So they would set up themselves to start generating Sage energy, because they thought maybe if they used nature energy, they wouldn't see the lashback because of the protective chakra shield of nature energy instead of being normal chakra. So when they eventually do get summoned by Minato, they already have their Sage Mode on. When we see them summoned, we get a little flashback to the story of why they were summoned. Minato would be summoned after Kakashi and Obito had formed their Susanoo, trying to hold back a ghetto statue Madara. Madara would eventually get impatient and summon all the Biju he had captured up to then. Rin, who had been in her perfect Jinchuriki state, had seemingly been killed. But we don't know yet. She had basically had Isobu ripped right out of her, as Minato had gotten there. Minato had tried his best to try and get close to Madara, but it would never prevail. Madara still had the benefits of the Sharingan, along with having the abilities of the Rinnegan. he was untouchable. Now, he will have the Nine Tails, who is Kushina. Kushina would basically try to fall back. She had used her chains prior to try and stop it, as Minato would try and keep him busy. Gamabunta would be summoned and eventually defeated by Madara. Minato in a last-ditch effort would summon Naruto and Shishui to help in this battle. Naruto and Shishui appear in a puff of smoke, standing atop of toads, both in their new attire. Naruto in a new orange jumpsuit, and Shishui in a waterbender type outfit, which you should be seeing on screen right now. They had exponentially grown. They had started getting close to their prime by aging quicker because of, obviously, the nature energy that they had been absorbing and letting flow through their bodies ever since they started the training. Minato had obviously seen this as a curious thing, for he didn't really notice it when he went through it, and Jiraiya ain't around right now to really ask, since he was out on another high level mission. Sure, the village was on a high lockdown, but there were still missions, and there were still S-rank missions to be had, Jiraiya being the one that would have handled it, where Tsunade and Orochimaru, the other two Sannin, would have currently still been in the village, ready to help fight Madara. Naruto and Shishui would look forward as they see Minato standing there. He had reverse summoned them back to their world and told them that it's now time for them to fight off against Madara. Madara was just standing on the ghetto statue as Naruto sees something happen. His mother gets lifted up in the air by some force, obviously the almighty pull, the Rinnegan ability. As Madara yells something and quickly goes through hand signs that he could even barely see with his Sharingan, the Nine Tails rips out of Kushina, her barely breathing on the floor. Naruto screams out to his mother as Minato appears and disappears, gone with her. Naruto and Shishui, now frustrated, would decide to full-on attack Madara. Since he was on the ghetto statue, they decided to have formed their Susanoo. The Nine Tails would not, though, be absorbed by said ghetto statue. He would actually be able to break free of the almighty pull and start fighting. He would see that Naruto and Shishui are actually fighting against Madara. Madara Uchiha, someone who Kurama had despised for years, someone who had forcibly controlled him. Kurama would slowly start fighting to behave more like he's trying to help Naruto and Shishui, for they're technically fighting toward the same goal, when Naruto and Shishui would have an idea. They both nod as they put themselves into a genjutsu along with Kurama, where they'd have a conversation. Time had seemingly slowed down. They don't know why, but they'll figure it out. This is obviously due to the Akoto Motsukami, or I don't really know how to say it, but Shishui's genjutsu, which is also now possessed by Naruto. And Kurama would say that he's not really there to get along with them. They have a common enemy, being obviously Madara. So what he'll do is he will share his chakra with them. It will obviously give them a gigantic boost. They're already really powerful, but this might be the push that allows them to win. He would also stare them down, saying that he'd never liked Uchihas, but the two of them might be an exception. He reminds them of someone, as the basically chakra essences of Indra and Ashura flash behind them, Kurama being the only one who caught a glimpse. He'd smile as they reappear. Naruto and Shishui would now be engulfed with the Nine Tails cloak, and on top of that, their Susanos would change color. Now they had achieved something similar to KCM1, or the Nine Tails KCM cloak that we saw in the War arc. Now they're actually seemingly a match for Madara, even though it's 3-on-1. Eventually, Madara would overpower them and basically grab Kurama and basically just absorb him. At this point, Madara had absorbed all the other Jinchuriki with the Ghetto statue, meaning he was being hyperfueled with chakra. It just came down to the right timing. As he absorbs Kurama, he would basically grab the chakra that was connected to Naruto and Shishui too, meaning he's grabbing their chakra out of their body. Both of them would fall to the ground, seemingly lifeless. Now, who would be able to save the shinobi world? Naruto and Shishui, now in darkness. Madara awakening the Ten Tails. Humans everywhere on the planet would start being encased by this tree-like thing, as Madara screams, "I won, Hashirama!" as he starts going through hand signs and seals the Ten Tails inside of himself, regaining all of his youth this time, as the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. Naruto and Shishui wake up in a dark room filled with water. They don't really know where they are until they see each other. They look at each other and see a glimpse of something in the corner of their eyes. As they look, they see an old man floating there. His name is Hagoromo Otsutsuki. He would explain basically what he was and who he was. He was the Sage of Six Paths, and they were the reincarnations of his sons. They had kind of combined the two lines, Uchiha and Senju. He would tell them that he foresees something happening. The Uchiha clan would try and revolt, having control of the Nine Tails under two of their clan members, obviously being Shishui and Naruto. But they would end up dying to someone else. He will not disclose who this person is or when this event would happen. All he could say is that it will happen. But for now, he will gift them with something that might do right all the wrongs he had done. All the things he had caused not raising his sons properly. Naruto and Shishui feel a sting in opposing eyes. Shishui on the left and Naruto on the right. They had awakened 6 Tomo Rinnegan. Hagoromo says that this is his gift to them, as the Nine Tails appears in 2 forms behind both of them, one slightly brighter and one slightly dimmer. These are the 2 halves of Kurama. He had said that Kurama is the most powerful of the tailed beast, being able to be split in 2, and still each half being able to fight multiple tailed beasts. He will bestow this conscience upon them. They will not have Kurama's full power, as most of it was grabbed by the Gedo statue. But he could give them some. They would not be able to continue with their toad companions who had disappeared seemingly in the fight, obviously to protect themselves. But the 2 halves of Kurama should be able to generate nature energy. This would give them a whole nother level of confidence. They would emerge from this slumber knowing that they are about to face Kaguya, which is exactly what they're faced with. Black Zetsu, who had been in Madara's sleeve, had taken over his body, as Naruto and Shishui had awakened and slashed through Madara. They had thought they could win this easily, but no. Now they're faced with the real threat. Kaguya, the bunny goddess. They stand high in their KCM 2 forms, or their Sage KCM forms, or 6 Paths KCM form, depending on how you call it. Okay, I get it, I'm beating around the bush. So now they're faced with Kaguya, a threat that wasn't to emerge for another 17 years. Now the fight begins. Now stood before Kaguya, Naruto and Shishui prepare. They are already in their cloaks, but they feel it would not be enough. They channel their chakra, having their Susanoo cover their current cloak as armor. Now they feel invincible. Naruto has the yang half of Kurama, which would enhance his physical strength and physical type jutsu to much greater extents, while Shishui has the yin half, increasing his genjutsu and ninja art type moves greatly, along with his Sharingan and Rinnegan abilities. Naruto and Shishui would have plenty of Rinnegan abilities that aren't necessarily the same than they would be. Shishui's would be focused on basically movement and genjutsu, meaning he'd be able to trick even the eyes of an Otsutsuki while seeing through any
hoax, or trick, while being able to misplace himself. Naruto, on the other hand, his abilities grant him extreme speeds, extreme strengths, extreme durability, and even some physical attacks, like being able to imbue chakra of any nature without needing to change your entire body's chakra to said nature. So he could easily perform Rasen Shuriken with different elemental natures without any problem. On top of that, he could also basically solidify his chakra, meaning basically what he could do in the KCM cloak. There are a few more abilities, but I don't want to focus only on this. So, what would happen is Naruto and Shishui would fight. They would travel from dimension to dimension, barely landing a hit on Kaguya. They're not even sure if they could win. They eventually get worn down as Kaguya pops back into the real world when two individuals see their chance. Now, Shishui and Naruto look back to see people they see as older brothers, Obito and Kakashi, in their Susanoo form. They jump above Kaguya, smacking her down to the ground as they throw a kunai, which would then put her in the Kamui dimension. Quickly, both of them yell, "Kamui!" as they move not only themselves in their Susanoo form, but Naruto and Shishui as well to the Kamui dimension, where they would basically triple team, if you will, Kaguya. This would come to something similar to canon, with obviously just being Kakashi and Obito replacing Sakura, having that final blow land, having Kaguya sealed away forever. The world would come out of mayhem, and the tailed beast would be resealed. Some Jinchuriki were saved, like Kushina, who had been given residual chakra that was around the area, and Rin would once again be bestowed with a Sobu. At this point, Jinchuriki will not exist in the same manner. The only time a tailed beast would be sealed is if they choose to. Because after what Naruto and Shishui witnessed and how powerful they currently are, they won't allow anyone to seal these, what they call beasts, anymore. Because they're not beasts. They're people too. They have emotions. They have mindsets. They're not mindless. They are like humans. Humans just need to learn to accept them. A 5 Kage summit will once again be called after the defeat of Madara. This would call for basically Naruto and Shishui, along with the duo of Kakashi and Obito, to be declared the next Sannin. Obviously, this only happens for Kakashi and Obito as a duo, while Naruto and Shishui are both separately Sannin. Also, on top of this, in the time that the 4th Hokage, Jiraiya, Naruto, Shishui, Obito, Kakashi, all of them, Tsunade, were at the 5 Kage summit, basically, Orochimaru had started doing his thing. He had abducted his current student, Anko Mitarashi, and had bestowed upon her the curse mark. He was planning on training her up to her most extents and basically just taking over her body. After they returned from the 5 Kage summit days later, they'd be notified that they found an underground base with inhumane experiments. In here they would find Tenzo, or Yamato. He would be the only living one, and they'd find notes about Orochimaru experimenting with jutsu, allowing him to take over people's bodies to extend his own life. Anko Mitarashi, his student who had been noted to have gone out with left the village with him, is now classified as kidnapped. Naruto and Shishui and a squadron of others would be sent after Orochimaru. This would include Tsunade and her current apprentice Shizune, and also Jiraiya. The 4th Hokage, being Minato, would deploy the squadron and demand that they get back Anko, for they cannot let their own be tarnished in a time like this. Bring Orochimaru to justice. This would obviously add that these people would spend a lot of time together. Naruto would learn some from Tsunade,
getting down minor, basically medical ninjutsu, and would actually start getting along with a little Shizune. He would really get along with her actually, and even after minutes of speaking to her, he'd already set up a date. He really likes her for some reason, he doesn't even know why. As for when they eventually find Orchimaru, he would escape, but they would bring Anko back safe. She was cocky and nothing had yet happened to her, so she's still the crazy snake bitch. Not traumatized too much, but she was stable at least. After her recovery, her and Shishui would hit it off. He would actually have been worried about her and constantly go back to see her to make sure that she was okay. So, yes, they're a thing. Obito and Kakashi would still battle for Rin's love as time goes on, and Guy would leave the village and seek of his own thing. He would become an S-rank shinobi within pretty quickly, for he had found a secret monastery of monks that all studied the way of the 8 gates. So he had been able to master a new form of the 8 gates, which is called the outer gate. It allows you to harness the power of the 8th gate, but not to the same extent. It's way stronger than the 7th, not as strong as the 8th, but doesn't have any repercussions at all, giving him the name of an S-rank shinobi. Other people like Kushina and Minato would live their life out as Naruto got older, and the village would be in peace. The Uchiha clan massacre would be stopped with Naruto and Shishui being there, and everything is peaceful. Itachi's younger brother Sasuke would go to basically the academy with the so-called Rookie 9. It's a group of 9 genin, 2 civilians, and 7 clansmen. Also born out of these are some nobles, but nothing we need to keep track of. But that is going to be it, guys. I really do hope y'all enjoyed this What If. It was, as always, edited by our lovely editor, Steak. Thank you for the Dragon Lord creating our intros and outro. And thank you for everyone who let us use their music in these videos. All those information will be down in the description. Feel free to check out all my alternate channels. Feel free to check out my social medias, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I post some really interesting things on there, and I really do think y'all will enjoy it. And last of all, I do want y'all to please consider joining my Discord. My Discord's a really interesting place. I'm on there all the time, nearly 24/7, except when I'm basically recording these videos, obviously. But yeah, if y'all want spoilers, some cool information about upcoming What Ifs, maybe even helping and getting a shout out in these videos, there's always an option for that. So I've wasted y'all time long enough. Roll that beautiful outro.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.
Shout out to Jaquan Jones and Pop Hop for becoming clan members. And a special shout out to the second tier clan members, aka the Clan Warriors, Sam Cross, Avery Swearingen, Gavin Weedle, and Nick Main 98.
And hey, if you want to become a member, scroll down from the video and click the join button, or alternatively scroll down to this link. Members get videos anywhere from 24 hours to a week early.